No, don't mind me. Just looking at the stars. It's another Bart Coppens Can't Sleep episode. You listen. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever watched a movie and heard of this cliché? When you look at the stars, when you look at the universe, makes you feel small and insignificant. It makes us feel small because of the sheer size, because of the sheer volume of things that are beyond our understanding. And it is often looking at the stars and the planets and realizing how little it is that we know about the reality that we live in every day that we come to that conclusion. But I say that is a misguided assumption. However, I say that this assumption is overrated. You see, we humans tend to be biased. We tend to look at the things that are bigger than us, things that make us feel small. But why don't we ever look at the things that are smaller than us? Now, allow me to explain. You see, it's not a secret that everything that happens on a big scale or a macro scale, it arises from small events that happen on a micro scale, right? And the thing is that everything that we look at, all the big events that happen, are a culmination of small events. You can name anything you like. Take evolution, for example. We're impressed by evolution and the way species form on a large macro scale through millions of years. But we don't tend to be impressed by a bacteria or a small ant who slightly adapts to a new situation. Despite that, it is the culmination of these small events that give rise to big events. And you can say this about anything, really. All the feelings you have is biochemistry. It's a culmination of small particles, your hormones, atoms, molecules, behaving in certain ways that culminate into the macroscopic universe that we tend to observe. Everything that has happened in our universe since the inception of time, everything, and I mean literally everything, from the small elementary particles such as hydrogen, forming large masses, becoming stars, forming heavier elements through nuclear fusion and fission. All of these events are a culmination of the smallest of particles. Even something as stupid, as simple as gravity is something we don't understand, because it's caused by a very small subatomic particle that we're still looking for, the Higgs boson. It's the reason we have this huge hadron collider in Switzerland. And it's funny because gravity, the reason why mass attracts mass, is the reason why planets have formed, is the reason why solar systems exist, is the reason the Earth is as it is today, as something as fundamental as gravity. We don't understand it on the smaller scale, but we can grasp it on the macroscopic scale. And yet we have an obsession of looking at the macroscopic universe because we perceive it to be bigger than us, while in reality it is really not. My point is, people like to look at the universe and say, this is bigger than us because it is bigger than us in volume. But I would argue that the microcosmos, the things that are smaller than us, the small but fundamental forces of the universe, which are tiny insignificant particles, such as the photon, which is responsible for light. And these things, these small particles that move in such a way that they have a very small probability of doing just about anything, well, these probabilities, they culminate into everything we can observe and everything that has happened in our universe. Yet still we obsess about how big the universe is. Well, you know what? It's not the size of the universe that makes me humbled. It's the small things. And that is the point of my video. This is the point of this vlog. It's basically to say, why are people so obsessed by emphasizing how big our surroundings are, while it is probably true that the microcosmos that lies below us, that we don't fully understand, is bigger than the macrocosmos. But we don't perceive it as way because it is smaller than us. And if you've ever wondered why I'm so obsessed with insects, that's one of the reasons. If you take a look at any organism, even if it's just a common housefly, at the surface level it is just that. A small and somewhat, as we regard, simple organism. But you can break it down. When you look on a smaller scale, you don't see an organism. You see, for example, its organs. You see its stomach. You see its fat tissues. You see its exoskeleton, its muscles, its nerve cells, all its organs. And a fly isn't just a fly, it is a collection of smaller particles called organs, and these smaller particles, they culminate into what we call a fly. But that's not where it ends, because if you look at one of these organs, for example, you look at the muscles that flies use to flap their wings when they buzz around. And if you look at one of these muscles, you'll see that it's actually a collection of smaller particles called cells. And it's funny because these cells, they culminate into muscles, which are one of the also smaller particles that culminate, or called organs, that culminate into a fly. So it's like smaller particles that form a collection of larger particles that form a collection of even larger particles. But even cells have smaller components to them. Have you looked at how a cell is structured? It has a cell, a mitochondria, for example. And you can even take that apart and identify, you can even dissect it in smaller pieces. And the smaller you go, molecules, atoms, quantum particles. It is incredibly complex and beyond our understanding. And that is why I find it so important to focus on the things that we perceive to be simple just because they are smaller than us in volume. But I can definitely tell you, beginning to understand this universe, beginning to understand our reality, and beginning to understand why things are as they currently are, it begins at looking at the small. Because at the small scale, this is where the fundamental events happen that culminate into everything, into space, into time, into the universe, the stars, the planets, I don't know, the multiverse, whatever is out there. My friends, I am encouraging you today to look at something small and analyze how complex it is. The beginning of understanding begins at the microcosm, not the macrocosm. And we should get rid of the cliche of people saying, wow, look at the stars, it's so much bigger than us. Well, maybe so, it is very complex, but I'm telling you, the things that are smaller are bigger than us, than the things that are bigger than us. Yes, that's right. And I just feel like people need to understand that. People need to understand that we don't even know the most elementary particles of our universe and don't understand how they work. And yet we are obsessed with figuring out the big things. Why? Big things are not what they seem. Big things are just a big combination of many small things. And that's the point. Look at something small. Challenge yourself. Think about how everything works. The funny thing is you can reduce everything to smaller and smaller components. We used to think that atoms were not reducible, but there are now currently theories that even atoms consist of smaller particles. And you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if these particles also consist of smaller particles. And if you go that route, there's a big fat chance that what we call the microcosm is actually the macrocosm, in the sense that the things that are beyond our understanding are mostly smaller than us. And I think there is more we don't understand that is smaller than us than there are things we don't understand that are bigger than us. And the funny thing is, if you think about it, the current theory is that everything in our universe, at least all the mass, that is, all the matter, it all expanded from a single point. Assuming the Big Bang Theory was real, which it probably was, everything that we see, we regard as big, once was compacted into one very small space, concentrated into one single point from where it basically expanded. And if you think about it, maybe everything we see is a small particle. Maybe we are the small particle culminating into something big. Sorry, I couldn't sleep tonight. Sometimes I get weird moods like this at night and I just feel like getting things off my chest. It's what makes me, me. I hope you don't hate this video, it's very off topic. See you guys. Bye bye. But just to summarize it before I go, the point of this video is that everything we regard as big is a collection of more smaller things that are more complex to understand than the big picture. And that you cannot understand the big picture without figuring out all the smaller components. And I would argue the smaller components, understanding them is more important than understanding the big picture. And that's how I felt all my life, really. I'm not an astrophysicist, I'm just an artist with a YouTube camera, an idiot. But people always ask me why I've been so obsessed with small things, like insects, nature. Well, the reason is because I think that's where the answers to life are. The answer that's beginning to understand our universe begins at something smaller than our own perception. I'm sorry for this, I'm gonna go. Bye bye, I love you all.